The grand doors of the royal hall had not opened in years, at least not for someone who mattered as much as she did. Courtiers and guards waited in tense silence, eyes fixed on the distant entrance. The princess had been gone for years, swallowed by whispers of war, of exile, of some mysterious journey to the stars. Children who had once played under the bright chandeliers had grown into young adults who only remembered her in paintings and stories. And yet on this quiet afternoon a sound broke through the stillness, a soft, deliberate creak. All heads turned. The air seemed to hold its breath. Through the towering doors a figure emerged. At first she seemed unreal, like a vision from a dream long forgotten. Her hair, once neatly braided for royal ceremonies, fell freely across her shoulders, streaked with silver from time and trials. Her eyes, bright as the twin suns of distant worlds, scanned the hall, meeting the gaze of everyone present. There was power in her presence, yes, but also a softness, a vulnerability that tugged at hearts even hardened by politics and duty. But it was not her alone who drew every gaze. In her arms she cradled a small human child, no older than 4, with dark hair and wide, curious eyes that mirrored her own. The child looked around without fear, fascinated by the grand hall, the high ceilings, and the shining armor of the guards. One little hand reached up to touch the princess' cheek, and she smiled, a smile that carried the weight of galaxies, of countless lonely nights, and battles fought not just with swords but with hope. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Is it really her?" one courtier asked, voice barely above a breath. The princess returned. Another shook his head, disbelief clouding his features. Some wondered if she was alive at all or if the sight before them was some trick of imagination. But the child in her arms, laughing softly and pointing at the crystal chandeliers, proved that this was real, real in a way that no memory, no rumor, no painting could ever capture. The queen, seated on her golden throne, did not rise at once. Her hands gripped the armrests, knuckles pale, and her eyes never left her daughter. The years of worry, the sleepless nights, the endless speculation about her fate, all of it seemed to surge into a single heartbeat as she stared. "Is it truly you?" she whispered. The words were almost lost in the vastness of the hall, but the princess heard them. She stepped forward, each movement steady, graceful, yet heavy with the stories of countless journeys across the stars. "I have returned," the princess said, her voice clear and calm, yet layered with the weight of untold experiences. She lowered herself onto one knee, bringing the child closer to the floor so everyone could see the small human clearly. "This child is my companion, my responsibility, and the future I have chosen to protect. I found them in a world far from here, a place that has seen pain and loss, but also courage and hope." Her words seemed to hang in the air, resonating with something deeper than fear or surprise, something raw and emotional that no one could ignore. The child giggled and reached toward the nearest guard, who froze in surprise. The princess gently placed a hand on the child's shoulder. "Do not fear them," she whispered, almost to herself. "They will protect you just as I will protect them." For a long moment the hall was silent again. Eyes darted between the princess, the child, and the queen. The weight of history pressed down on everyone present. Some saw betrayal, some saw hope, and some perhaps saw the unyielding truth of humanity's courage reflected in that small, fearless human child. The princess finally stood, holding the child high, letting everyone see the bond they shared. "I have returned," she repeated, softer this time but with undeniable certainty. "And I bring with me the future, in a form more precious than any crown or kingdom." The court could not deny the power in her voice. The air seemed lighter, almost electric, as if the very walls of the palace recognized her presence. Courtiers shifted uneasily, unsure whether to kneel, to run, or to speak. Yet in that moment all of them felt it, the impossible combination of fear and hope, grief and joy, loss and reunion, wrapped in the small human in her arms and the woman who had once been their lost princess. And so, years after she had disappeared, the princess walked back into the world she had left behind, carrying with her a spark that could change everything. The kingdom had waited a long time for this moment. Some wept silently, some gasped aloud, but all knew that life, courage and hope had just returned in a way none of them could have imagined. The princess stood in the center of the hall, the small human child resting comfortably in her arms. Courtiers shuffled uneasily, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The air was thick with tension, a strange mixture of curiosity, fear, and awe. Every eye in the hall followed her, trying to read the emotions hidden behind her calm, steady gaze. The child looked around, fascinated, pointing at the shining banners and the polished marble floor, and giggling at the reflection of the sunlight on the golden chandeliers. Their laughter was innocent, pure, and it cut through the tension like a warm light in a darkened room. Finally, the princess broke the silence. Her voice was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it carried the weight of her journey across countless worlds. "I have returned," she said, and the words echoed gently off the tall walls. "I have returned not alone, but with hope." She lifted the child slightly higher, letting the courtiers see the human face clearly. "This is a child I found far from here in a place of despair, a world that has seen darkness. They survived not because of luck, but because of courage. And courage is something we cannot ignore, no matter how small it may seem." Some courtiers exchanged confused glances. A few whispered quietly to one another. "Why a human? Why bring a child into our kingdom after all these years?" The murmurs grew, as fear often does in the absence of understanding. A senior advisor stepped forward, robes flowing, eyes narrowed. "Princess, you speak of courage, yet we have questions. The child is from a foreign world, a place we do not know. How can we trust them? What threats might they bring? Our people need certainty, not stories of faraway lands." The princess did not flinch. She knelt, lowering the child to the floor so everyone could see. The child took a small step forward, hands reaching instinctively for the polished marble, eyes wide with wonder. The princess smiled warmly. "This child is not a threat," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange authority that silenced the hall. "They are proof that life, even in its most fragile form, can survive the greatest hardships. They remind us of courage, hope, and humanity's spirit. These are things worth protecting, no matter how far they come from." A few young nobles, children who had grown up hearing tales of the princess' disappearance, stepped closer. Their eyes were filled with curiosity and awe. One whispered, barely audible, "She really has changed, yet she is still our princess." Another nodded, his voice trembling, "And the child, there is something about them, something pure." The queen, seated on her throne, remained silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. But her eyes betrayed her emotions: hope, fear, pride, and a longing that had not faded even after all these years. The princess took a gentle step forward, extending her free hand toward the court. "I have walked among stars, seen worlds crumble and rise, and learned that life, no matter how fragile, is always worth protecting. This child is a living reminder that our choices matter, that even when darkness surrounds us, courage shines through. If we turn away from them, we turn away from the future." The child, sensing the princess' words, reached out to touch her hand. She held their tiny fingers in hers, smiling softly. The gesture, simple and natural, seemed to bridge a gap that words could not. The courtiers felt it too, an unspoken truth that perhaps, just perhaps, they had waited for something like this all along. Suddenly, the hall doors opened again, and a gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of distant forests and oceans unknown to the kingdom. The princess inhaled deeply, letting the memory of her journeys fill her. She looked at the child, then back at her mother. "I did not return because I was ready," she said, voice steady and calm. "I returned because I could not leave them behind. And now they are here with us, and they need protection as much as the kingdom does." Silence fell again, but this time it was different. The hall was no longer tense with fear. It was filled with anticipation, a fragile hope that something new and extraordinary had begun. Courtiers, advisors, and nobles exchanged glances, some still uncertain, but all aware that the princess had brought something impossible back to life, a spark that could change the kingdom forever. In that moment, the princess and the child stood together, united not by blood or title, but by courage, by hope, and by a bond that the universe itself had tested and preserved. And for the first time in years, The kingdom felt that the impossible might just be possible again. Even as the princess held the human child close, a murmur began to ripple through the court. Some voices were soft, almost respectful. Others carried a sharp edge of suspicion. The halls, once filled with awe at her return, now seemed to vibrate with doubt. Courtiers whispered behind fans and columns, questioning her choices and her judgment. "What is she thinking, bringing a human into our kingdom?" one noble asked, glancing nervously at the child. "Do you not see the danger?" The queen observed the exchange from her throne, hands folded but tense. Her daughter had returned, yes, but with a human child no one fully understood. It was a delicate situation, one that could tip the balance of the entire kingdom. The queen's mind raced, weighing the possibilities. Could the child truly be trusted? Could this act of compassion endanger generations? Yet, beneath her worry, a small spark of pride refused to die. Her daughter had returned alive, and she had chosen life and hope over fear. A senior counselor, tall and severe, stepped forward, his robes brushing the marble floor. "Princess," he said, voice steady but firm, "the council must understand why you have returned in this manner. Bringing this child into our court is unprecedented. There are dangers we cannot ignore. What if this child carries secrets, enemies, or illnesses unknown to our people? How can we be certain that your decision is wise?" The princess did not flinch. She lowered her gaze to meet his, her eyes steady, carrying the strength of countless worlds. "I understand your concern," she said softly. "I too have feared what others might think. But this child is not a weapon nor a secret meant to harm. They are a symbol of life surviving against all odds. I have walked through galaxies of ruin and despair, and I have seen the courage of humanity shine brighter than any blade, brighter than any army. This child carries that light." Some of the courtiers shifted uneasily, unconvinced. "Light does not protect a kingdom," another whispered, voice trembling. "It is strength and power that do." The princess, lips curved into a gentle, sad smile. "Strength is nothing without purpose," she replied, "and power is hollow without compassion. This child reminds us that life itself is the greatest power we can wield. If we cannot protect them, we cannot truly call ourselves rulers." The child, sensing the tension, reached up and touched the princess' cheek. She bent down slightly, resting her forehead against theirs, and the room seemed to pause. Even the harshest voices felt the warmth radiating from this bond. It was a quiet, unspoken plea for trust, a reminder that courage and hope often come in the smallest, most unexpected forms. Still, whispers persisted. Questions swirled like a storm. Had the princess changed so much that she now tradition? Could a human, so different from their own people, belong in the royal court? Would the child survive the political games, the jealous rivals, the hidden enemies who lurked beyond the palace walls? Some felt fear rising in their chests, fear that clashed with the awe they had first felt. The queen finally rose from her throne, her presence commanding silence. Her voice was soft but carried authority. "Doubt is natural," she said. "We do not yet know the outcome of the princess' choice, but we must remember who she is. She has faced worlds we cannot imagine and returned to us with a living proof of courage. Before we judge, let us look with our hearts as well as our minds." The princess nodded gratefully at her mother, holding the child close once more. "I do not ask for blind trust," she said, her voice steady, firm. "I ask only that you see what I have seen. Life, even fragile and small, can change everything. This child survived because they dared to hope, to believe in others when there was no reason to. And I promise you, I will protect them as fiercely as I would protect this kingdom." The hall fell silent again, heavier this time with thought. Doubt still lingered, but hope had returned, too, subtle and persistent. Eyes that had been suspicious now considered possibility. Hearts that had been cautious felt the faint stirrings of something greater. The princess had returned not just with a child, but with a challenge, to embrace courage, to trust, and to see beyond fear. In that moment, the whispers of doubt became more than mere skepticism. They became a turning point. The kingdom stood at the edge of change, poised between fear and hope, and at the center the princess and the human child remained unshaken, reminding everyone that courage, even in its quietest form, could alter the course of history. The council chamber was tense, the kind of tension that made the air feel heavy and the walls seem to lean inward. The princess stood at the center, the human child clinging to her side, eyes bright but alert. Outside the chamber, whispers of doubt had grown into heated debates, and now the council demanded answers. Leaders from every corner of the kingdom, their robes rustling, their expressions stern, filled the room. They had questions and they wanted certainty. A general, tall and imposing, stepped forward, his armor glinting in the light from the high windows. "Princess," he said, voice firm, "we cannot ignore the potential risks. This child, this human, is unknown to us. How do we know they are not a spy or worse, a carrier of some hidden danger? The kingdom cannot gamble on sentiment." The princess lifted the child slightly, holding them protectively against her chest. She met the general's gaze steadily, her eyes carrying the calm strength of someone who had faced impossible odds. "I have traveled to worlds where life barely clings to existence," she said. "I have seen entire civilizations fall to despair, yet some survived because of courage, hope, and care for one another. This child is one of those survivors. They carry no threat, only proof of the human spirit that refuses to die." A counselor shook his head. "Words do not protect kingdoms," he said sharply. "We need action, proof. What if your feelings cloud your judgment?" His words were cold, deliberate, designed to test the princess. The chamber seemed to shrink under the weight of expectation. All eyes turned to her, waiting, demanding, almost threatening. The child looked up at the princess, their small hand reaching for hers. She knelt down, lowering herself to meet their gaze. "Do not be afraid," she whispered softly. The child smiled and rested their head against her shoulder. In that moment, the courtiers witnessed a bond that was more than care. It was trust, understanding, and courage forged in the face of uncertainty. Straightening, the princess turned to face the council again, her voice rising, steady and commanding. "I do not ask you to trust blindly," she said. "I ask you to see what I have seen. This child has survived beyond expectation. They have faced worlds where nothing else endured. And if we cannot protect them, we fail in our duty as leaders. The measure of our kingdom is not only in strength and walls, but in the courage to defend life itself." Some in the council shifted, unsure how to respond. The general's jaw tightened, but the intensity in the princess' gaze left him without words. "Very well," he said finally, voice gruff. "We will observe, but understand this: any sign of danger and the kingdom will act to protect itself first." The princess inclined her head respectfully. "I understand," she said, "and I promise you, you will see no threat, only hope." She held the child closer, feeling the warmth of their small body, the quiet trust in their eyes. "This child reminds us that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes it is smallest among us who carry the greatest strength." Outside the chamber, the palace had begun to notice changes. Servants whispered of a new energy, a spark that seemed to radiate from the princess and the child. Soldiers who had been skeptical felt an unfamiliar warmth in their chests when they saw the child smile. The kingdom, which had long feared loss and darkness, began to sense something extraordinary. The princess knew this was only the beginning. Challenges would come and doubts would not vanish overnight. But she felt a quiet certainty, rooted in experience and resilience. She had faced far greater dangers than skeptical leaders, far lonelier nights than these debates could bring. And as long as she had the child by her side, she could face anything. The council chamber emptied slowly, leaving the princess and the child alone for a brief moment. She knelt and whispered softly, "We will show them, little one. They will see courage, hope, and strength in ways they have never imagined." The child giggled and reached up to touch her face. She smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and unspoken promise. In that simple gesture, she felt the weight of her mission and the warmth of possibility. And so the first challenge had come, and the princess, steadfast and unshakable, had faced it not with anger or fear, but with the quiet, unwavering strength that had guided her across the stars. The kingdom was watching, the council was judging, and the child remained a symbol of hope. Together, They had begun to prove that courage and life could triumph even in the midst of doubt. Days passed, and the kingdom began to notice a subtle change in the air. Where there had been suspicion and whispers, now there was curiosity and cautious admiration. The princess and the human child moved through the palace with quiet grace, their bond becoming a living story that everyone could see. Courtiers who had doubted them could not ignore the way the child laughed freely, chasing sunbeams across polished floors, or how the princess knelt patiently, teaching the smallest details of their world with gentle patience. The child was fearless in a way that startled even the bravest guards. They touched the intricate tapestries, explored the carved staircases, and asked endless questions about the palace and its people. And the princess answered each one with a mixture of humor and care, never scolding, never showing irritation. Courage, she would whisper to the child, is not just about facing danger. It is also about being yourself in a world that may not understand you. The courtiers began to see the truth in her words. Even the skeptical general who had demanded proof now watched silently, a faint respect appearing in his eyes as he saw the child's resilience and curiosity. The princess, holding the child's hand, led them to the palace gardens where exotic flowers bloomed under the sun. "See how life thrives, even in places where it was not expected," she said softly. The child nodded, eyes wide with wonder, and for the first time the courtiers understood what she meant. At night the princess would tell the child stories of distant worlds, of skies painted with colors no painter could capture, of creatures so strange they seemed like myths, and of people who dared to survive when everything seemed lost. The child listened with rapt attention, clutching a small hand to their chest, eyes sparkling. And in return the child reminded her of something she had almost forgotten: the simple joy of laughter, the comfort of trust, and the unshakable warmth of hope. One afternoon a young noble approached her quietly. "Princess," he said, voice hesitant, I do not understand why you chose a human, but seeing them with you I feel something I have not felt in years, hope, perhaps even courage." The princess smiled, a soft, gentle smile that reached her eyes. "You see what I have seen," she replied. "Sometimes the smallest among us remind the strongest of what truly matters. This child is not only a survivor, they are a teacher of life itself." The queen, observing from her chambers, felt a stirring of emotion she could not contain. She called the princess to her side, her eyes glistening with tears. "You have changed more than I imagined," she said quietly. "And yet you have reminded us all of what we once knew: courage, life, hope. You have returned not only to us, but to the kingdom itself." The princess held the child closer, feeling the warmth of their small body against her own. "It is not I alone who brings hope, mother," she said softly. "It is this child, and all who choose to see life as precious." Even the palace staff, who had once avoided the child for fear of unfamiliarity, began to smile and offer gentle care. The child's laughter became a constant in the corridors, a sound that reminded everyone of innocence and strength intertwined. Soldiers on watch would pause, catching the child's bright gaze, and feel a quiet determination swell within them. The princess had shown them something they had long forgotten: that courage is not only in battle, but in protection, care, and the belief that life itself is sacred. One evening the princess and the child stood at the highest balcony, gazing at the stars. The child tugged at her sleeve, pointing at a tiny flicker in the distance. "What is that?" they asked. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from their face. "That little one is the universe," she said. "And somewhere out there, there are people who need hope just like you did. Never forget how precious life is and how much courage it takes to protect it." The child hugged her tightly and she held them close, feeling a surge of quiet pride and unspoken promise. The kingdom could see their bond, and slowly hearts softened. Where there had been fear and doubt, now there was admiration, curiosity, and a stirring of hope that could not be. The princess and the child were no longer just figures in a hall. They were living symbols of courage, trust, and the enduring light of life itself. And in that light, the palace seemed brighter, the air lighter, and the hearts of all who witnessed them stronger, ready to believe once more in what courage, love, and hope could achieve. The peaceful days of the palace were suddenly shattered by the arrival of an envoy from a distant and powerful planet. The hall doors slammed open, and a cold wind swept through, carrying the scent of foreign worlds and unfamiliar authority. The envoy, clad in dark ceremonial robes, stood at the center of the hall, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Whispers immediately spread, tension prickled the air, and even the guards instinctively straightened, unsure of what threat this visitor brought. "Princess," the envoy began, voice echoing like steel against marble, "your actions have not gone unnoticed. You bring a human child into a kingdom that is not yours alone. That child is not of our alliance. Their presence is dangerous. We demand that the child be surrendered to us immediately." The princess' hand instinctively went to the child who clung to her side, eyes wide but unafraid. She took a steady breath and stepped forward, the calm in her gaze cutting through the hall like sunlight piercing fog. "This child is not a threat," she said firmly. "They are proof of life surviving against impossible odds. They are a symbol of hope and courage, and I will protect them with my life." The envoy's lips tightened. "You cannot understand the consequences of defiance. Your kingdom may be small, but our reach is great. You endanger not only the child but your people by harboring what is considered forbidden. You must comply, or we will act." A murmur swept through the court. Some of the older nobles looked uneasy, glancing at one another with worry. Even those who had begun to admire the child's presence now faced fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of conflict, fear of losing everything. The queen, seated on her throne, placed a hand over her heart. She knew that the envoy's threat was serious, yet she also saw the determination in her daughter's eyes, a determination that had carried her across the stars and back. The princess knelt slightly, bringing herself to the child's level. "Do not fear," she whispered softly, brushing their hair from their face. The child's small hand gripped hers, radiating quiet trust. She straightened and faced the envoy with unshakable resolve. "You speak of danger, yet the true threat is in abandoning life, in turning away from courage and hope. I will not do that. Not now, not ever." The envoy narrowed his eyes, clearly not expecting such confidence. "Then you leave us no choice," he said coldly. "Prepare for consequences." Before the hall could erupt into panic, the princess lifted her voice so all could hear, strong and unwavering. "I do not stand here alone," she declared. "Every person in this kingdom who believes in life, courage, and hope stands with me. This child represents more than a single life. They represent what we can achieve when we protect what is right. And I will not fail them, even if the stars themselves rise against me." The child laughed softly, small but fearless, and reached up to touch the princess' cheek. In that simple gesture, the hall seemed to still. Soldiers straightened, courtiers paused, and even the envoy faltered for a moment. There was power in innocence, in the bond of trust between protector and protected, and the entire kingdom could feel it. Slowly, the envoy stepped back, calculating, realizing that this challenge was not just against one woman, but against a force greater than his armies, the unity of courage, hope, and life. He did not leave without warning, but he departed knowing that the kingdom's resolve had been proven stronger than anticipated. The princess exhaled, holding the child close. "We have passed the first test," she whispered, voice soft but full of pride, "and there will be more. But together we can face anything." The child smiled, pressing their small face against hers, and she felt a surge of hope and strength that no army, no threat could ever break. The court, once hesitant and divided, now saw clearly what the princess had been teaching all along. Courage was not measured by weapons or armies, but by the willingness to protect life, to face fear, and to believe in the impossible. The human child, small and seemingly fragile, had become the living symbol of that courage. That night, as the stars gleamed over the palace, the princess and the child stood on the balcony, gazing at distant worlds. She whispered, "We will meet challenges, yes, but we will endure. And one day the entire kingdom will understand what we already know. The true strength of life is in hope, courage, and the love we protect." The child nodded, their small hand clutching hers, a reminder that even the smallest being could change the hearts of many. And in that quiet moment, the kingdom felt it too. The power of trust, the strength of courage, and the unyielding light of hope had returned, and nothing could take it away. The palace was alive with a quiet energy that had not been felt in years. Courtiers walked with lighter steps, guards stood taller, and even the hallways seemed to hum with anticipation. The princess moved through it all with the human child in her arms, their bond unmistakable to anyone who looked. Where once there had been doubt and fear, now there was admiration, curiosity, and the beginning of understanding. The kingdom was learning slowly that courage and hope could come in the smallest and most unexpected forms. The queen, standing at the edge of the balcony, watched her daughter and the child with tears glistening in her eyes. The princess had returned after years of uncertainty, bringing not only herself but a symbol of life that reminded everyone of what truly mattered. "You have changed everything," the queen whispered, almost to herself, without a single sword drawn. Outside the palace, word spread quickly. People spoke of the child who had come from a distant world and survived impossible odds, and of the princess who had protected them with unwavering strength. Soldiers who had once questioned her decisions now told tales of bravery, and families in the streets whispered hope into the ears of their children. The kingdom, once cautious and divided, was beginning to unite under the quiet yet undeniable power of courage and trust. A council meeting was called, not to challenge the princess, but to witness what she had achieved. The courtiers, some still hesitant, stepped forward one by one. They knelt, not out of fear but out of recognition that this child represented the enduring strength of life, the kind of strength that no army or law could command. The princess stood tall, holding the child close, her eyes meeting each face in the hall with calm authority. "This child is not here to take power, nor to challenge tradition," she said softly but firmly. "They are here to remind us what we must never forget. Courage, hope, and life are our greatest treasures." The child, sensing the moment, reached out to touch the hand of the nearest counselor. The gesture, so simple and innocent, carried a power that words could not express. The counselor smiled, feeling warmth he had not felt in years. One by one, others followed, some kneeling, some bowing slightly, all acknowledging the truth that had been placed before them. The kingdom's heart had shifted, and the princess' choice was finally understood. Later, the princess led the child to the throne room where the queen awaited. "You have done more than return," the queen said, voice thick with emotion. "You have restored hope to an entire kingdom." The princess smiled, lowering herself to the child's height. "It is not just me, mother," she said gently. "It is this child and all who choose to see life and courage as precious." The child hugged her tightly, and for a moment the palace was filled with quiet light, a light born of trust, love, and the unshakable spirit of life itself. The princess addressed the kingdom one last time that day, standing on the balcony, the child in her arms. "We inherit more than lands and crowns," she said. "We inherit responsibility, courage, and the duty to protect life wherever we find it. And sometimes, the smallest among us teach the greatest lessons. This child is one such teacher, and their life is a promise that hope cannot be defeated." The people cheered, a sound that rolled through the streets and up into the mountains beyond. It was not just joy, but a celebration of resilience, of courage, of the simple truth that life, fragile yet unyielding, deserved to be protected. The princess held the child close, feeling the warmth of their small hand in hers, knowing that the future had begun anew. Years of fear, uncertainty, and loss had ended. The princess had returned, the human child had survived, and the kingdom had witnessed a lesson that would echo through generations. That courage, hope, and life itself could not be broken. And as the sun set over the palace, casting golden light over the smiling faces below, the princess whispered softly to the child, "This is only the beginning. Together, we will shape a future worth living for." And in that moment, the kingdom understood fully. The legacy of courage and life had returned, and it was unstoppable.